Just one final thought on housemanization. When we look at visionary planning projects today, even some of the institutionalized projects today, we recognize that the betterment of society or the goal of the plan sometimes is at odds with an existing population. Certain projects are often labeled as examples of housemanization, and a lot of times it's hyperbole, but we do see some projects where the displacement of certain individuals or certain groups of people can be a rather large concern. We see this sometimes with gentrification, or we see it with some large scale projects like those we previously discussed involving stadium plans and Olympic and World Cup events. Our next agent of change is a man by the name of Ebenezer Howard. Ebenezer Howard is known for his idea of the Garden City. Howard, like some of our early theorists, Tonies and Simmel, recognized some of the concerns in cities. And again, this going back to the 19th century when cities, these industrial cities were new places, and a lot of social theorists and scholars looked at them very critically and said that these places are lacking the attributes and the positive effects of nature. So Ebenezer Howard in the 1890s put together this Garden City plan. He said that overall, urban life is destructive, and that a solution to the destructive nature of urban life should be satellites, satellite communities. These satellite communities would have limited populations of no more than 30,000, and they would be self-supporting. They would include a local hinterland to provide agricultural needs, to provide natural resources. The satellites themselves would include a local economy, a local industry, a local workforce. So rather than have these sprawling metropolitan areas, Howard said that we could just have a series of satellites. We could have a series of these self-supporting limited spaces. He recommended green belts and open space. The green belts, again, would be those places for agriculture, and open space would allow people to embrace the restorative attributes of nature. He's quoted as saying, "Town and country must be married, and out of this joyous union will spring a new hope, a new life, and a new civilization." So Howard had a very radical idea to how we grow urbanization going forward. He's looking to move away from the established life in urban and metropolitan areas and create these new satellites. Here's an image of Howard's Garden City, and you can see here the different arrangement of satellites. So you have on the image on the right, you have a core space surrounded by 6 satellites. This idea, this interpretation of how to grow our urban areas may sound familiar. One primary example is located not too far from Towson University in the form of Greenbelt, Maryland. Greenbelt was established during the Great Depression as really a social experiment. It was an American approach to Ebenezer Howard's Garden City ideas. You can see the image here from the 1930s showing the radial approach, showing the clustered housing surrounded by open space and green belts on the outside. There were a handful of these Garden City projects throughout the northeast part of the United States and into Ohio during the 1930s. And again, it was a revolutionary approach. It was a radical vision for planning into the future. Now, while Greenbelt retains its historic 1930s nature in the old part of Greenbelt, the area around it has transformed and sprawled and become part of the DC Baltimore metropolitan area. A more recent example close to home of Ebenezer Howard's approach is found in Columbia, Maryland. Columbia was designed in the 1960s by a man named James Rouse. Rouse incorporated these Garden City approaches. Some of you in this class may be familiar with or maybe even be residents of Columbia, Maryland, and you should recognize the patterns that were established as part of Columbia, the different villages that feed into the larger Columbia core, the different parks and the different bike paths that connect the areas and provide for open space. So these ideas by Ebenezer Howard, they were revolutionary, much like Olmsted and Haussmann and L'Enfant had these revolutionary ideas. It was a visionary way to approach planning, and it called for radical social and economic changes. While a lot of these different ideas of parks, open space, grand boulevards are incorporated into our planning today, early on they were recognized as truly different. And beyond Columbia, a lot of our suburban growth today reflects different aspects of this garden city idea.